Hey guys, Chubbs here, back again with another ACS scripting tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about parallel arrays, and we're going to be using them to create our very own little RPG quest system. So parallel arrays are basically when you have more than one array and you give them the same number of elements, and then you order their elements in such a way that they match up. So that description might not make a whole lot of sense, so what I'm going to do is just pull up the script editor real quick and show you a small example that I made, and this should make it much more clear what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and just pull up the script editor, and I'll zoom in. So you can see here that I've created two arrays. One is a string array called game titles, and then the other is an integer array called release years. The important part is that they both have the same number of elements. I've also ordered the elements so that they match up. So let me explain what I mean by that. Game titles contains Commander Keen, Doom, and Rage. So those are the three strings that it contains. And then release years contains 1990, 1993, and 2011. So if you look at the very first element of the game titles array, which is Commander Keen, what if we go to the very first element of the release years array? You get 1990. Well, that is the year that Commander Keen released. Another example, what if we go to the very last entry of the game titles array? We get Rage. Now what if we go to the very last entry of the release years array? We get 2011. That's the year that Rage came out. So notice what I mean in that we have ordered these arrays in such a way that their entries match up. To just give one final example, let's say that we added another array that runs parallel to these. I'll call this array, actually I'll make this a string, and I'll just call it game genres. I'll give it a size of 3, and then for the genres I'll type in platformer, FPS, and FPS RPG. Even though Rage isn't really an RPG, it does have some role-playing elements, so I figured I would tack that on. But notice now that platformer matches up with Commander Keen, FPS matches up with Doom, and FPS RPG matches up with Rage. So that's just another example. So you can have even 3 or more arrays that are parallel just by ordering their information in such a way that it matches up. So now that I've explained the concept of parallel arrays, let's take a quick look at this little map here. This is going to be the map that we turn into our RPG. So I want to also just point out I've not really done a great job texturing it. I really just wanted to get something functional. So here we have the player start. Ahead of the player we have this sort of structure here with 3 windows, and you can see that behind each window stands a marine. And these marines are just going to be dormant, so they're just going to stand there like statues. But what we're going to do is for the RPG, we're going to make it so that we interact with the line in front of the marine, and that's going to be what actually does the magic. The marines themselves are just sort of decoration. But if we take a right-hand turn here and go outside, you can see that we have a swimming pool. At the bottom of this swimming pool is a backpack, and that's going to be one of our quests to go down and retrieve that backpack. Let's go back to the main room where the player start is. If we go behind the player and come around here, you can see that we've reached an outdoor area. And up on top of these crates here, you can see a chainsaw. So that's going to be another quest, is to reach this chainsaw. The player can't jump high enough to get to it, so what he has to do is come around, and you can see that I've set up this sort of ramp that goes up. And he can climb up the ramp, get to the top, and then drop down on the chainsaw. So that's going to be another quest. And then the last quest that I set up is if we go down this hallway here and then come all the way around, we get to this lift. This lift goes down to a sort of a pipe area, and you can see that we have 3 pinkies. So that's going to be our last quest, is to kill the 3 pinkies. So now that I've sort of showed you the map and explained the 3 quests that I'd like to have, let's go back to the script editor and start to set this up in the code. So I'll pull up the script editor and zoom in, and I'll go ahead and just start with the line that we always have at the start or at the top, and that would be the number sign or the pound sign, include, space, and then inside quotations, zcommon.acs. And then I'll go down a couple lines. And what I'm first going to do is create an array of quests. And this is going to be a string array, and it's really going to be more like quest names or like very short descriptions of the quests that we want to have. So I'll type str for string, and I'll just call this array quests. I was thinking of calling it quest names, but I guess I'll just call it quest. I want this to have a size of 3 because that's the number of quests we're going to have. I just showed you those 3 quests, the backpack, the chainsaw, and the pinkies, so 3. And I'm going to go ahead and initialize this array with the names of the quests. And again, this is going to be just like very short descriptions. So for the first one, I guess I'll just start with the backpack. I guess I'll just call it retrieve the backpack. That's the one that's at the bottom of the pool. Then I'll do a comma, and we could keep going on one line like this, but I'm just going to go down a line. You can use white space like this to your advantage, and the compiler's okay with it. So the next quest, I guess I'll just do the chainsaw. Just call it reach the chainsaw, since it's up on those crates and the player has to figure out how to reach it. And don't forget the comma. And then we'll do the last one, which will be the pinkies, and I guess I'll just call it kill the pinkies. Just keep it nice and simple. We could keep this brace down here, but I'm actually just going to bring it up to the end like that, and then you have to put a semicolon after that closing brace whenever you're initializing arrays like that. So let me first just click the compile button to make sure I didn't make any typos. There we go, didn't have any errors. So we've created just a basic string array. It's called quest. It contains 3 strings, and those strings are retrieve the backpack, reach the chainsaw, kill the pinkies. So what I want to do now, in order to have a quest system, we're going to basically need to have some booleans, because if you think about it, like when you play an RPG and you get a quest, that quest needs to have some things that are tracked, like whether the player has actually received the quest, whether he's fulfilled the quest goals, and even whether he's gone back and turned the quest in, like to get his reward and to finish the quest once and for all. So we're going to create 3 arrays. These are just going to be Boolean arrays, and we're going to, the way that we set our code up here later, we're going to make them parallel to this quest array, and I'm going to try and explain it as we get into it. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and create the other 3 arrays, and I'll also explain the logic behind them. I've already sort of hinted at it. The first array, again, it'll be a Boolean array, will be called, I guess I'll just call it quest received. And just like with the earlier example I gave, when you have parallel arrays, you want them to have the same number of elements. So this will contain 3 booleans. Now I could go on and initialize the booleans. I could do false, 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 because when the player starts, it wouldn't make sense for him to have already received a quest. That's something that you would expect him to have to do. You wouldn't expect him to have quest immediately. So we could do it this way, just initialize it, but something that we actually, something that's sort of nice about ACS is that when you create booleans, they are false by default. So we don't have to initialize them. We can actually just specify how many booleans we want this array to have, and then just throw a semicolon right after it like that. And let me make sure that'll compile. Yep, so that compiled without errors. So what this is going to do is it's going to create an array of booleans, and all 3 of those are going to be false by default. So in order for them to become true, we're going to have to just manually go to the ones that we want to flip and assign them to true, but by default they will be false. So for our specific purposes, that works out perfect. The next array that I want to create, again, we're going to have these arrays all sort of running parallel to each other, is going to be called, it'll be a Boolean array, and we're going to call this quest. This is the one that's going to be sort of tough to name. I guess I'll just call it quest goals fulfilled. I was thinking of calling it quest goals complete. That's kind of an ugly name, quest goals fulfilled. I guess we'll stick with it though. This will also have a size of 3. And I'll explain the logic behind these again once we're finished. And then this will be the last array here. Make another array of booleans, and we're going to call this quest turned in. That's very self-explanatory. And again, since they're going to be parallel to one another, make sure that they all have the size of 3. Compile, so we didn't have any errors. So to explain the logic here, we have the names of the quests. That's kind of obvious. You would want the player to be able to see what the name of the quest is. That way he knows what he has to do. But these 3 booleans are there to sort of control the flow of the quest. So we have one boolean array called quest received, and this allows us to check whether we have received each of these 3 quests. And that will of course be done by going up and talking to those Marines that I showed you. We have another boolean array called quest goals fulfilled. That is for when you have gotten the quest and you've actually completed the goals of the quest. So just as an example, like for the reach the chainsaw quest, the quest goal would be fulfilled for that specific quest whenever we got to the chainsaw and collected it. And finally, the last array here of booleans is very self-explanatory. It's called quest turned in. And this is just, this is basically when you have gotten the quest, you've fulfilled its goals, and then you've gone back and talked to the Marine that gave you that quest. So when you do that, you're going to turn in that specific quest. So let me just give you guys a quick example. I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself here. But let's use the chainsaw quest as an example here of how our logic is going to be. So array indexing starts at 0. So let's count again. 0, 1, 2. So reach the chainsaw is going to be index 1 of quests. And index 1 is what we would then plug into these arrays anytime we wanted to manipulate this specific quest. So when the player got the, or when the player received the reach the chainsaw quest, we would want to go to quest received, we would want to plug in an index of 1, and we would want to make that boolean true. So that way the game would know that the player had gotten that specific quest. When he finally played and managed to drop down and get that chainsaw, we would want to go to the quest goals fulfilled array and go and set index 1 of it to be true. And that way the game would know internally that the player has fulfilled that goal of getting to the chainsaw. And then when we went back to the Marine that gave us that chainsaw quest, we would want to go to quest turned in. And again, we would want to take index 1, which corresponds to reach the chainsaw, and we would want to make that true. So now that we have created these arrays, let's just start with writing one of the quests. I don't want to do it all at once. Let's start with the, I guess we'll start with the backpack quest. And we're going to have to give it to one of these Marines here. It can really be any of them. Let's just give it to the one that's right in front of us. So we're not going to be interacting with the Marine himself. We're going to be interacting with that line def in front of the Marine. So I'm going to go to this line def, and I'm going to give it an action of script execute. And we actually have not written the script yet, but we're going to get to that here soon. I'm going to set the activation to be when the player presses use, and we're going to make it repeatable. So we're going to have to come back and specify which script it executes, but let's go ahead and get that line action set up, and then once we've written the script, we'll go back and we'll specify it here. So let's pull up the script editor window, and let's write a script for that Marine. So remember, this is going to be the backpack quest. So I'll write a new script, and I'm going to name this script, trying to think of a nice little name for this. Let's just call this backpack quest NPC. How about that? It's kind of explanatory. It tells you what this script's going to be for. It's going to be for the NPC that gives us the backpack quest. We're not going to be sending this quest any information. If we wanted to, we could send it the index of this quest. That might be nice to do, but I'm actually just not going to do that. I'll just make it void. So we can call this script and we're not going to send it any information. So before we flesh this script out and actually make it do something, I'm going to go ahead and tie it to that line def. So let's click the compile button, and even though that script does absolutely nothing, that script should now be choosable. So let's go ahead and pull up that line def. Let's check string, and there it is, backpack quest NPC. There we go. So that line def right here is now set up so that we can interact with it and trigger that script. So now let's make that script actually do something, and that something should be giving us that backpack quest. So let's think about how we should do that. First thing I want us to do is to go to quest received, and we want to, if we look at the indexes, again we're going to count 0, 1, 2. You can see that the backpack quest has an index of 0. So we would, since these arrays are going to be running parallel to one another, we would want to go to the quest received array and go to index 0 of that array and make it true, and that way it would signal that we have received the backpack quest. So let's do quest received. We're going to do an index of 0 because that would correspond to the backpack. We're going to say true. But what if we have already received this quest? We may not want to do that right off the bat, so let's put this inside of a condition. Let's go ahead and just write a conditional statement. So I'm going to say if. We'll say if we've not already received the quest. So we could either do quest received 0 is false, or we could do it the way that I prefer, which is to just put an exclamation symbol at the start. This is the not operator, so this is basically saying if quest received with an index of 0 is not true, if it's false. For a beginner though, that might be a little tougher to read, so I'm actually just going to go back to the way I had it before with false. I think if you're starting out, if you're sort of new to programming, that might be easier to read. So we have a condition there. I'm going to move that code up inside it. So when we interact with this NPC, to recap what we've done, we're going to check if we've already received that quest. Or basically it's actually going to be the inverse. We're going to check if we've not received that quest. If we haven't yet received it, then we're going to change that Boolean to be true so that we have received it. What we also want to do is tell the players that he has just received that quest, because he needs to know that he's gotten a quest. So I'm going to go ahead and just print a message, and this is going to be like the Marine NPC talking to the player. So I'll just do print, and I'm just going to type something about the backpack. I'll just say, go get my backpack from the bottom of the pool. I'm not going to put a whole lot of thought into the writing, because this is really just more about the functionality than good writing. But that will be the message that he sends us. And for now, I think that's all that we will do. We're going to come back and we're just going to work on this and flesh it out. So let's just compile. Let's go up and let's interact with the Marine, and let's make sure that that message prints. Alright, so the message did indeed print, and I also attempted to go up and interact with him again after I had received the quest, and nothing happened, and that's because of this condition that we threw in. So we're making sure that the player only receives the quest if he's not already received it. So now what we need to do is we need to make it so that when the player goes and gets this backpack, we go to the quest goals fulfilled array and we set index 0 to be true, because again index 0 is going to be corresponding to retrieve the backpack. So let's write just a new script here. We'll call this backpack collection. This will be a void script that doesn't take anything. This is going to be real simple. This is going to be a script that runs when we get that backpack. So it's just going to be real short and sweet. We'll just say quest goals fulfilled. We'll type 0 for the index because that's what corresponds to the backpack quest. We're going to say true. And you'll also notice I had a little bit of inconsistency here. I've capitalized false here, but for true I've had them in lowercase. You can do all caps or lowercase, either way. Really it's best to stay consistent, so I'm going to go up here to false and just make that all lowercase. Either way will work. It's usually best to try and stay consistent. But to recap, we've written a new script called Backpack Collection. What we're going to do is we're going to attach this script to the backpack so that when we pick it up, this script runs. And all this script does is it goes to the quest goals fulfilled array. It gets whatever's at the index of 0 and it sets it to true. So that way the game will know internally that we have fulfilled the goals for the retrieve the backpack quest. So let's compile, and then let's go to the backpack thing and pull up its properties. And then we're going to give it an action of script execute, which is number 80. We'll select string, and then we'll select backpack collection. When you give an action to an item like this, that action executes when the item's collected. So when we get that backpack is when this script will execute. So behind the scenes, this Boolean is being flipped, but for the NPC, we've not coded anything in to react to that. So let's do that. Let's go here. We've already checked if we've gotten the quest, and if we haven't, then we're going to receive it. But let's add a second check here. We're going to say if quest goals fulfilled 0, because that corresponds to the backpack, is true. In other words, if we have gone and gotten the backpack, then we will be able to turn the quest in. So we'll say quest turned in. This is the other array that we created. 0, if I could type, equals true. And we'll also print a message to the player thanking him. I'll just type in something silly. Thanks, man. I hadn't had that backpack for nearly a week. So some guy will just make it like he's lost it in that pool and he's never been able to get down and get it for whatever reason. So to explain what we've done here, I'll just sort of go through the logic. So when we talk to him the first time, he's going to give us the quest, and then we're able to go to the backpack and collect it. Actually, we could have done that beforehand, but ideally the player would do this after he'd received the quest. But when we go and collect the backpack, this script is going to execute, which will set quest goals fulfilled with an index of 0 to true, and that will make it so that when we go back and speak to that NPC, since this line here is evaluates to be true, we turn the quest in and then he thanks us. And we can also give the player some sort of reward. We're not going to do that for now. What I want to do is just make sure that we have got this working. So let's go ahead and compile it. Let's go back and play it, and let's just test it out real quick. Alright, so it sort of worked. You could see that we were not able to speak to him again when we had gotten the quest, and then when we picked up the backpack and came back, he thanked us. But we also had some things that I think could be improved on. The first thing is that when we collected the backpack, we didn't get any sort of notification. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to go to our backpack script here, and I'm going to print that we have fulfilled the goal for that. So I'll just say something like, that must be the backpack he was needing. Time to go back and return it. So that way we'll have some sort of dialogue that lets the player know that the quest has been finished and he can go back and turn it in. And then something I didn't like is that after we had turned the quest in, we were still able to talk to him and get this same thanks man message. And that's because this line here is always going to be true. So what we basically need to do is, instead of only checking whether we've fulfilled the goals, what we also need to check is if we've not already turned the quest in. So I'm going to use the AND operator, which is those two signs like that, and we're going to say, we're basically going to check if the quest goals have been fulfilled, and if quest turned in with an index of 0 is equal to false. So if we have fulfilled the goals, but we have not turned the quest in, then turn it in. So that will make it so that once we go back and speak to him and turn the quest in, he will thank us. But when we interact with him afterwards, nothing will happen. So now let's just test it, and let's see what it's like this time. There we go. That's much better. So when we went back after we had turned the quest in, we were not able to speak to him. We could add some additional dialogue after the quest has been turned in, like if you just want to have some generic chitter chatter that goes on. I'm not going to do that in this tutorial. That could be a challenge you want to throw in. But the next thing I want to do is just sort of spice this up just a little bit. This is not going to have to do with quests or anything. It's just going to have to do with presentation. What I want to do is just write a very basic function that shows a quest received message at the top of the screen, followed by the name of the quest. And we'll also have similar messages for when you've fulfilled the goals and when you've turned the quest in. So let's go down. I'm just going to write a new function here. So I'll type the word function. And I've done a tutorial on functions if you want to go back and watch that. I'm not going to talk about it in great detail. I'm just going to try and move ahead here. So this function is not going to return anything. And I'm just going to call this show quest received message. And when we call this function, we're going to pass it the index of the quest that's received. I feel like that's a useful piece of information to give it, and that way it'll know what to show. So for the variable we pass it, it'll be an integer, and then the alias that integer is going to go by inside the script will be quest index. So when we call this function, we will use HUD message to show a message on the screen. Let me zoom in here. I'm going to show you guys what I want. This is not going to be the actual code. I basically want on the screen, somewhere near the middle of the screen at the top, I want to see something like this. So for the backpack quest, I would like to see something like quest received, like that, and then underneath it, retrieve the backpack. I want something like that to be at the top center of the screen. So that's not the actual code, obviously, but that's just a representation of what I want. So to do that, let's go ahead and just type a HUD message. And this is a long function. I've talked about this before. I've done a HUD message tutorial, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about this at all. I'm just going to type it out here real quick. So we'll say quest received. The type of HUD message will be, just use plain. The ID of the HUD message will make 1. This will be the X position. I want it to be halfway across the screen, so I'll do 1.5. I think if you put a 1 instead of a 0, that makes it centered. So you could do 0.5, or you could also even do 1.5. 1.5 centers it, but you can go to the HUD message wiki page to read all about what those different things do. Next is the Y position. I'm going to put this quite high up on the screen, so I'm just going to do 0.1. That'll be near the top. And then I think next is the hold time. This is how long the message stays on the screen. When the player sees a message like this, I guess we'll make it so it's just on the screen for just 4 seconds. So I'll just type 4.0. And then below that, I want to show the name of the quest that was received. And this is where our array is going to come in handy here. So I'll do HUD message again, a string, and instead of just typing in some sort of string like this, I'm going to say quest, and then the index that we plug in is going to be whatever we pass this function. So quest index, and I'll talk about that more here in just a second. And then most of this will be the same. Actually, you know what? I just realized that I missed something up here in my first HUD message. I didn't type the color after the ID. I'll make the color green. Almost missed that. HUD message has so many arguments you have to send it. It's easy to forget them. So for the name of the quest, I'm going to do mostly the same stuff. HUD message plain for the type. The ID will be 2. The color, I guess I'll just make it white. It'll be at the same X position, but I want it to be a little bit below the quest received message, so I'll do 1.5 instead of 0.1. And this will also stay there for 4 seconds. One last touch is I want the quest received, I want this to be large, and then I want the name of the quest to be sort of small. So I'm going to do set font, big font, above the first HUD message, and then I'm going to do set font, small font, above the name of the quest. So for this line here, just as an example, let's say that we call show quest received message, and we pass it an index of 1. Down here, what that will show on the screen is whatever is in index 1 of our quest array. So if we go up here, index 1 is reach the chainsaw. So if we called that function and we passed quest index 1, then reach the chainsaw would be the string that was displayed beneath quest received. So that's just an example of what it's going to do. So I'll compile. Thankfully we didn't have any errors, so that's the first function out of the way. Let's just go ahead and just run a quick test and make sure that's working correctly. So show quest received message, it would make sense to put it here in our backpack MPC after we've received the quest. So I'll do it above the print statement. So I'll say show quest received message, and remember that we are passing in the quest index. Since this is the backpack quest and retrieve the backpack is at index 0, I'm just going to type 0. Click compile. So what should now happen is when we interact with that backpack quest giver, we will receive the quest. We should see the that indicator at the top with the HUD messages. We haven't demonstrated it yet, but we'll see it here in a second. And we'll also see that Marine's dialogue about go get my backpack from the bottom of the pool. So the 2 brand new HUD messages should show up, and we should also still see his dialogue. So let's just test that and make sure that it works out and that it looks okay. Alright, that was perfect. You could see when we got the quest, we had the message at the top of the screen, and we could also still see his dialogue. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'm just going to quickly write 2 more functions that are very similar to the one that we already have. So I'm going to do another function. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because I want to hurry up and move on. So this function is going to be called show quest goals fulfilled message. We'll pass in the quest index. And I'm just going to copy paste here because we're going to be doing mostly the same stuff. Instead of quest received at the top, I'll just call this, this is the one that's going to be tough to word, quest goals met. How about that? Seems alright. And then we'll just write one more function. This will be when the quest is turned in. So I'll call this function show quest turned in message. These function names are getting a little ugly here, but that should be alright. We'll pass it the quest index, and I'm just going to copy paste again. And instead of quest goals met, I'm just going to call it, or I'm just going to make it say quest turned in, and then we're going to show the name of the quest. So let me make sure that that compiles. Yep, so we have 3 functions. We can call these at any time to show those special messages up top. Let's go ahead and just integrate these. So we haven't done the show quest goals fulfilled message yet. That'll be when the player collects the backpack. So I'll put it here above the player's dialogue where he says that must be the backpack he was needing. So show quest goals fulfilled message. And again, we have to pass it the index. The backpack quest index is 0. And then we need to do the show quest turned in message. So let's call that function right here in the NPC quest giver script, right here when we turn the quest in. So show quest turned in message. And again, we'll pass it 0 because that is the backpack quest index. So let's compile. We should be done here, so we're just going to run another quick test and just make sure that our new HUD messages are showing up and behaving the way that we want. Alright, that was perfect. Everything worked just right. You could see the HUD message when we got the quest, when we collected the backpack, and even when we turned the backpack in. And each time, not only did it say like quest received or quest turned in, it also showed us the name of the quest below it, and that way we knew which quest it was talking about. So we've really gotten most of the hard work out of the way. The good thing about those functions that we wrote is that we can now very easily use those for our other quests. So I'm going to try and hurry up here. I feel like I've already drawn this tutorial out a little bit longer than it needs to be. The backpack quest is up and running. It's working just fine. So let's move on to the chainsaw quest. I'm going to give that quest to this guy right over here on the right side. So let's pull up the script editor. And I'm just going to do a separate script for this guy. So I'm going to call this script Chainsaw Quest NPC. And most of this guy's logic is going to be the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the Backpack Quest NPC lines of code and paste them in. And I'm going to change what I need to here. So the first thing we need to change, if we go up to our quest array, reach the chainsaw is at index 1. So down here in the chainsaw quest NPC, instead of passing or instead of using an index of 0, which was for the backpack, we need to change these to be 1 so that they're dealing with the chainsaw. So I'll just change the 0s to 1s. There we go. What I also want to do is change the dialogue here so that it deals with the chainsaw. It doesn't make sense to be talking about a backpack here. So let's change this. This is when we receive the quest. We'll say something about the chainsaw. Hey, see if you can reach my chainsaw on the crates outside. There we go. And then when we turn the quest in here, we'll change the dialogue. Whoa, you actually reached it. You know what? You can have it. So he's nice enough to give it to us. So that should be all that we need for the chainsaw. Something else I'd like to point out is notice that we've duplicated a lot of code. Code duplication is something that's normally frowned upon, and really it's something you should try to avoid. You could probably restructure these scripts in a much better way and maybe write write just one script that could handle multiple NPCs instead of having all these separate NPC scripts. The way I'm doing it here I think is easier for a beginner to understand, but it is a good idea to try and make your scripts as flexible as possible and to not duplicate a ton of code. So if you were wondering, if it's bad to be duplicating code like this and copy pasting, it is a bad practice and it's something you should try to avoid whenever possible. But that doesn't mean that it won't work. It should work just fine, but it just, it isn't very efficient. So with all that out of the way, we've got the Chainsaw Quest NPC dialogue done, but what we haven't done yet is made a script for when we go out and get that chainsaw. So we already have a backpack collection quest, or script I should say. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to do some more copy pasting. So let's copy this entire backpack collection script. Let's go down, let's paste it, and let's change it so that it deals with the chainsaw instead. So I'm going to rename the script to Chainsaw Collection. For quest goals fulfilled, we want to change the index to be 1 because that's corresponding to our chainsaw quest. And I'm going to do the same here for the show quest goals fulfilled message. Remember that this function takes the index of the quest, and if we're talking about the chainsaw quest, that would be index 1. And then we need to change the dialogue here to match the chainsaw. This is what the player is sort of going to say to himself when he gets it. So we'll say, just say something like, "Wow, that was tricky to reach. I'd better return this thing to him." Again, definitely not Hollywood quality writing here, but I'm just trying to write whatever gets the job done. But we now have the Chainsaw Quest NPC script. We also have the Chainsaw Collection script, so we've got them written. They should be fully functional. What we haven't done yet, though, is tied them to the map itself. So let's go to this Marine right here on the right side that I showed you just a little bit earlier, a few minutes ago. And let's go to the line in front of him. Let's give it an action of script execute. We'll select string, and then we'll choose Chainsaw Quest NPC. And we'll make it repeatable whenever the player presses use. So that should now be out of the way. Now we need to go over to our chainsaw. Let's pull up its properties, and whenever we collect it, we want to do script execute, which again will be 80. We'll make it a string, and we'll say that it executes the Chainsaw Collection script. And that's the one that we just went over, where the player sort of talks to himself and says that he should return it. So all of that should be set up. So let's run a quick test. I'm going to try and go quick here, and I'm going to actually try out both quests. I'm going to get the backpack, and we're also going to do the chainsaw. So let's do both quests here in one run, and let's just make sure it works out okay. Alright, that was perfect. So both quests worked. You could also maybe see there during the test that I tried to talk to him again when I shouldn't have been able to, and it was not triggering the dialogue. So those conditional statements that we wrote were working correctly. We were only able to talk to him when we needed to receive a quest or needed to turn the quest in, and everything was just working out fine. So the last quest we need to do is the Pinky quest, where we need to go down and kill the Pinkies. So before we do that, I think the player needs to get a better reward here for getting the backpack. So in order to help him deal with the Pinkies, what I'm going to do is just give him a shotgun and some shells. So let's go to the backpack quest NPC, and let's go here to where we turn in the quest. And not only are we going to show messages, we're also going to go ahead and give the player a shotgun. So we'll just say give inventory, and here's where you type the name of whatever you want to give him. I'll just type shotgun, and then amount, I'll just type 1. And we'll also give him some shells. I think you can also do shell box. I think that's what it's called. So we'll do give inventory shell box. That might not be the correct name. We'll try it out anyways. There we go. So let's just try this and make sure it works. Shell box might not be the exact name, but we'll try it and see if we get a shotgun and a bunch of shells to go with it once we've turned the backpack in. So let's just test it real quick and make sure we don't have any problems. Alright, so we got the shotgun, and I'm not sure if we got the shell box or not. I'm not sure if that even worked. I think you could actually even do shell, and then you can specify how many. So we could just, if we want to max the player out on shotgun shells, I could just type some silly number like 100, and that'll give him the most shells he can have. Something else you might have noticed, when we got the shotgun, we didn't equip it. If you want to have the player equip it, you can use, let's see, set weapon. I was trying to think of the name of the function. You can use the set weapon function, and then you can type whichever weapon you want the player to select. So we'll type shotgun, and what that will do is it will force the player to switch over to the shotgun instead of just standing there holding his pistol. So let's try that again. Make sure that he gets the shotgun, he switches to it, and he has a whole bunch of shells. Alright, so that worked great. You can see we switched over to the shotgun. We had 100 shells to work with, so we definitely have plenty of shells, and that should help us when it comes to taking on those pinkies, although we could also use the chainsaw for that. But I mean, the player could take on the pinky quest before he gets the chainsaw, so maybe one option for the players, instead of getting the chainsaw first, he could go get the backpack first, turn it in to get the shotgun, and then use that. So he has some options at his disposal. So let's go ahead and just code the pinky quest up real quick. I'll go ahead and pull up the script editor again. We've done chainsaw quest NPC, so here we'll do pinky quest NPC, and we're going to do some more of our copy paste magic here because it's going to be mostly the same stuff. So the pinky quest, it's the last index, which should be index 2, because if we count here, 0, 1, 2, index 2 is kill the pinkies. So under pinky quest NPC, we'll want to change all of these 1s to be 2 so that we're sure that they correspond with that kill the pinkies quest. Alright, so we've changed those 1s over to 2s. I'm also going to change the dialogue. So this is when the player receives the quest. So I'll say we've got a pinky problem down in the basement. Go clear them out. There we go, just something silly. And then when we turn the quest in, those things were a nuisance. I hope that's how you spell nuisance. Thanks, man. Some more quality writing there from me. But we have the dialogue set up now. And now all we need to do is write some sort of logic that handles the pinkies being killed. I've done a video before about how you can monitor whether or not enemies are dead. I've featured that in, I think, several of my tutorials now. So I'm going to write this out fairly quickly. I'm not going to go into great detail over it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new script down here called Pinky Death. Actually, you know what? I'm going to call it Pinky Death Monitor. And unlike the other scripts, which are void, which means we have to explicitly call them by collecting an item or some other way, I'm going to make this an inner script. So this runs when the map first starts. And I'm going to make this an infinite loop. So it's going to be a while loop that just runs non-stop. And what this loop is going to do is basically it's just going to constantly check whether all of those pinkies are dead. If they are dead, then we're going to use this logic here where we set the quest goals fulfilled to be true, so on and so forth. And if they're not, then it's just going to wait. So what we're going to do actually, instead of while true, what I'm going to do is instead of checking for true, I'm going to check the count of the pinkies. So I got ahead of myself there. So let's go to the pinkies. I'm going to select all of them, and I'm going to give them all a special tag. I'll just give them a tag of 666 since that's an evil tag. Let's go back to our Pinky Death Monitor script. So I messed up and got ahead of myself. So what I want to have happen is when this script runs, which will be when the map starts because it's an inner script, I want it to immediately start checking whether there are any things with an ID of 666 alive. If there are, then it needs to just wait and then check again. And it's just going to keep checking over and over and over until that's no longer true. So instead of while true, we're going to do while thing count. Type we don't care about. The ID we do care about. That's 666. So while the count of things with an ID of 666 is greater than 0, in other words, while there's at least one of them still alive, just wait. That's what this is going to do. So while pinkies are alive, it's sort of going to be stuck in this while loop, and the code here is not going to execute until all the pinkies are dead. And guess what the code here is going to be? It's going to be the quest goals fulfilled. That'll be for when we finish the pinky quest. So let's copy this stuff here from the chainsaw collection, and I'm going to paste it down here. And for quest goals fulfilled, remember the pinky quest has an ID or has an index of 2 because it's the last index. So under the Pinky Death Monitor, we're going to change quest goals fulfilled to point to have an index of 2. And then for the quest goals fulfilled message, we'll also make that 2. And then we need to print some sort of dialogue, like when the player talks to himself after the pinkies have died. So I'll just say, thank God those things are dead. It's time to head back. Now that is some quality writing, folks. So again, just to recap, this script here is going to execute as soon as the player enters the map, and it's just going to be stuck in this while loop here while at least one of those pinkies is still alive. The moment they all die, the quest goals fulfilled Boolean at the index of 2, which corresponds to the pinky quest, is going to be set to true, and then we're going to see the message that tells the player the quest has been fulfilled, and then we'll be able to go back and turn the quest in to that pinky quest NPC. So all that talking and stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and just run one last test here, just make sure that all of our quests are working, and then we'll be right back. Actually, I got ahead of myself there. As soon as I pressed the test button, I thought to myself, you know what? I haven't even assigned that quest to this Marine here. So the line def in front of the Marine doesn't have any action special. So like an idiot, I forgot that. So I'm going to go ahead and give that line an action special of script execute. For the string, we'll do Pinky Quest NPC. And this will be when the player presses use repeatable. There we go. So that should be all that we need there. I always seem to get in a rush and forget something. So let's try it again and make sure I didn't screw anything up this time. Alright, so as you can see, all the quests worked. The backpack quest worked fine, the chainsaw quest worked fine, and then when we also went down into this weird pipe area and killed all 3 of these pinkies, that worked as well, and we were able to come right back up and turn the quest in. So all of our quests are working. We were getting the correct HUD messages, we were seeing the correct dialogue, and the game was tracking them all properly, and that was thanks to the setup that we have here with the parallel arrays. These arrays are all 4 of these arrays are basically working in tandem to create this quest system. Now, this is an imperfect system because there are some ways you can break it, and we'll go ahead and just test one way real quick. This will sort of be like a bonus in the video because this is still not like 100% polished and complete. But one way that we could possibly break this is, what if we for example, what if we go and get that backpack before we've even asked the NPC about it and gotten that quest? That's something we'll do right now. We'll just see if we can solve that problem. So let's play it, and I'm just going to run and get that backpack, and then we're going to go back and speak to him, just see what happens, see what kind of problem we get. Wow, okay, so if I'm being honest, I really didn't expect that to work. So it appears, I thought this would be broken, but I believe the way that we've set this up, I believe it's actually ended up being foolproof. I thought the quest receive thing would trip us up here. That really kind of surprised me there. I did not expect that. So it appears that if we decide to go off and complete a quest without actually getting it from the NPC, it still kind of works out, and we can still go back and turn it in without having really any major issues. So I'm going to do another quick test here and see if we can do that with the chainsaw and the pinkies, just to see what happens. Alright, wow, so all 3 of the quests worked if you went ahead and did them without actually speaking to the NPCs first. So that surprised me. I thought that it would break in some way. I thought the way that I had structured the logic there, that it wouldn't quite work, and maybe we'd have to throw in some more conditional checks, but it does work. You know, one way you could improve that is to change up the dialogue, because like if the player goes and gets a chainsaw for a guy, if he hasn't spoken to the guy yet, it wouldn't make sense to say, I'd better bring it back to him, because we haven't spoken to him yet. So maybe it would make more sense for the player to say something like, I wonder what this chainsaw's doing up here, or something like that. And that would be a fun challenge to take on if you guys want to try and do that for yourselves. And really all that you would have to do is go to the chainsaw, like for the chainsaw specifically, you would go to the chainsaw collection, and you would do a conditional statement here to check if you had received that quest. If you had, then you would know that you'd spoken to the guy who lost it. If you had not received that quest, then that would mean you hadn't spoken to him, and so you could then make the player say something different to himself. So that would be a cool little challenge to pose to yourself, to just see if you can take care of that and see if you can solve that problem for all of the quests. But I hope you guys have found this useful and that you've learned something. And most of all, I hope that you understand what parallel arrays are and just how useful they can be. So if you have any questions about parallel arrays, feel free and ask. Also, if you have any questions about this quest system or just like the RPG stuff in general, feel free and ask. And I'll make sure and put a link to this map in the description so you can download it yourself and try modifying the code, making your own little changes and additions to it. Thanks for watching. This is Chubs, signing out.